Hi to everybody. I don't see your face, unfortunately, but I hope, to be clear. And I think most of you know me, but I just say a few words. I'm Cristina Solera from the University of Torino, and from CIRSTE, Center for Gender Studies of University of Torino, and I'm actually the principal investigator, the scientific coordinator of the project MINDtheGEP, of which this forum is within it. And what about the topic? I mean, as you saw from the advertisement of this forum, the title is Gender Quotas and Positive Action, an Attack on Meritocracy, a MINDtheGEPs Open Forum. And this comes from a policy brief that we produced and we delivered also to the European Commission within MINDtheGEP in the summer. And as you see from this slide, do you see my second slide?
Yes.
Yes, okay, just to be sure that everything is going on. So this is the reference if you want to have a look to the policy brief I'm drawing on for this speech. Why speaking and why addressing these issues of gender quotas and positive action, and how is it connected to the issue of meritocracy, to the ideology, the rhetoric, or the challenge of meritocracy? Okay, as I told you, this is part of the MINDtheGEP project and consortium. Most of you are familiar with, but if you are not, just to give an idea of the partnership that is behind this project, that is also behind these reflections on the policy brief. And so it's a project within the Horizon 2020 Science with for Society on gender inequalities in research and science and how to tackle it through gender equality plans. And we are a diverse consortium made of different countries, but also different type of institution, not only academia, but also public research center and a private research center. So just to give you an idea, but you find, if you want more information on the project, there is the web page and everything. What's the starting point of this policy brief and this analysis and reflection on positive actions? Well, the starting point, the first starting point is the well-known evidence that gender inequalities are still there. I mean, they have been addressed, they have also reduced, but they're still persisting all over Europe, all over the world, I would say. And usually gender inequality is captured by three metaphors that are well known: leaky pipeline, glass door, and glass ceiling. Leaky pipeline, the fact that more women compared to men leave academic career. Glass door has to do with the first step into a stable position. That is very relevant with the neoliberal turn of the academia and so the increasing precariousness. Glass ceiling has to do more with the vertical segregation and the access to the top positions. There is evidence that these are still there, and there is also a huge debate within which gender equality plans enter, which is which policies are necessary to tackle these persisting gender inequalities, and if gender is widespread and is a social structure, as many feminists like Barbara Riesman was saying, so is practiced and embedded at different levels, different dimensions through multiple intersected barriers, then multiple intersected barriers need multiple intersected actions to be removed. That's the logic of the gender equality plans. But what about specifically these positive actions, which is a piece of a possible puzzle to tackle gender inequality? So this second policy brief is focusing on positive actions, and especially on two types of positive actions. I will spend more words later on. That is gender quotas on the one hand, the financial incentives on the other hand. We can say that gender quotas work, let's say, ex ante work on the commissions, on the decision arena bodies, while financial institutes work more on the outcomes. And we will see the different rationales, the different impact of these two. But first of all, what is meant by positive action? Again, I guess we are all familiar with it, but I think it's important to remind that the rationale behind affirmative action has to do with the idea that there are members of some groups, some minorities, or minorities not necessarily numerically, but that even though they have similar or even superior skill levels, they don't go into the doors, and because of historical discrimination or glass ceiling. And this, by introducing affirmative actions, the main rationale is that this is also waste of talent. And so affirmative action could also bring an efficient allocation of talent to be achieved. So with a positive also economic return. But obviously economy is not the only rationale behind that. We will see in a moment. What are the possible positive actions? We will see in academia, but generally positive action have been applied in many fields, because gender gaps in politics, in labor market participation, in many fields are there. So, for example, the private sector affirmative action policies support female labor participation, typically through gender quotas in corporate boards. And here there are some references of gender quotas introduced in various countries like Germany, Norway, Spain, Italy, and so on. But also in the public sector, particularly in politics, but not only, affirmative action policy are there and have been applied again through gender quotas. What about academic labor market? Prior affirmative action, prior in the sense of the most widespread affirmative action policies, the ones that are more legitimate and more applied, are those again that have to do with gender quotas or tenure clock stopping policies or dual career policies. But very few, very rarely, and here is again, some references of gender quotas that have been applied within academia or within research institutions, for example, through gender quotas in the scientific evaluation committees. There is a huge debate on gender quotas, but there is also a debate on whether and how, on which condition, which premises and which conditions gender quota are a success to reach what. And we will, I wrote fixing number, but also fixing knowledge and institution, or cultural in tandem with structural actions, because we will see in a moment that the impact, the success of gender quotas is not in itself, but this is usually the success of a policy is not in itself, but it depends on how intersect with other policies. And this is the same with gender quotas, and this is the same also with financial incentives. That is another type of positive action that is less widespread, also because it's more difficult to find consensus on it, and that's to do with financial incentives on outcomes. And actually, the policy brief and also the discussion I want to have with you, the seminar today, is focusing on both, but especially of this, let's say, innovative form of positive action, which is financial incentives on outcomes. And I will tell you 3 cases of this type of positive action financial incentives. That one case is for Germany. That was also one of the earliest. Then is the case of the University of Trento, the case of University of Torino, my university, where this kind of action has been just approved a few months ago. But before describing you these specific actions, how it has been designed, and with which meanings, and also through which process to get consensus on it, just start to raise some issues linked to the debate around gender quotas and financial incentives around positive action, and especially the debate around the attack to meritocracy, which is the subtitle of this policy brief. Because one of the major resistance to the design and application of types of positive action, and especially of financial incentives, but also gender quotas, is the endorsement of a meritocracy. Is it an attack to meritocracy? It's like we lower the level in order to get more minority people, more women in this case. We have to lower the level, and so this is like an attack to meritocracy. Well, there is a lot of literature on that. For example, I'm just mentioning one at the end by School in 2016, how meritocratic ideology stigmatized quotas in the United States. And the issue is that has to do a lot with the way people read the causes of inequality. So the dominant view on what there is behind gender gaps, what are the causes of gender gaps, because obviously all the remedies to inequality must be grounded in the argument that the inequality is illegitimate and so is unfairly produced. If there is no agreement that that gender gaps have to do with structural and not really with structural and cultural barriers, and not really with meritocracy or like productive gaps, obviously resistance towards positive actions is there. And the dominant ideology of meritocracy is something that is within the picture. And if is the main explanation of existing gaps, then this makes a problem in accepting this kind of positive action. And indeed, there is a lot of evidence that affirmative action is a controversial issue in the realm of social policies, because in a lot of time is considered as something that is there regarding the level of qualification, and so might raise negative reaction toward these affirmative action programs. But how then take together gender equality measure and discourses about gender equality measure with the discourses and the notions of merit in academia? Because in academia and in the research organizations, in academia now, discourses and practices and policies toward gender equality are there also because of the enforcement of designing gender equality plan to apply for European financing, but also because, there is the more the commitment to gender equality, but this goes together with this strong idea that merit is still the main driving force of what happens in the university. So how to take together these two different discourses in order to legitimate positive action? Then we will see if they work or not, but legitimation is the first issue. So the issue that a lot of literature has shown, analyzing different case studies of success, is the issue of building consensus on the why of gender gaps, as I was saying before. What does it mean to building consensus on the why of gender gaps? Means go inside and deconstruct what there is behind the idea of a neutral meritocratic or excellence guide in the university. So meritocratic principle built on the assumption that objective evaluation are possible. And if it's like that, and if there is the widespread idea that objective evaluations are there and are in place, then inequalities, although there is the discourse that gender inequality exists and we have to tackle that, if the meritocratic principles are believed to be neutral and in place, then at the end, inequalities are seen as not the result of discrimination, but the results of productivity gaps or other. So it's as a result of individual more than a collective way of defining or collectivity or different ways of defining excellence and so on. But we know that a lot of feminist studies, gender studies and feminist studies in particular, have shown that meritocratic practice reach this objective evaluation, and there are gendered norms in the way merit and excellence is defined. There are different, the power of networks and the way networks are built and the way they work in defining excellence and in deciding recruitment and promotions. So how do we build consensus on the why of gender gaps? This means to awareness of discriminations that is necessary. Why I'm stressing a lot this? Because this is part of the debate in political action, but this is part of the premises to be able to introduce positive action and especially financial incentives within a gender equality plans, a gender equality policies. Building consensus on the why of the gender gaps is necessary, which means that structural actions such as those that fix gender quotas or fix financial incentives need to go in tandem with let's say cultural action, with spaces of reflections, of showing evidence, of debating about the reasons behind evidence, because otherwise we will see fixing numbers is possible, but it becomes problematic to raise consensus on fixing numbers, but also fixing numbers might not be enough if there is no reflections on the mechanisms behind the low numbers of women. So building consensus on the why of gender gaps means, first of all, show evidence of gender gap, which, I mean, all of us, we are aware, we work on these issues, so we are perfectly aware. And there is a lot of literature showing, you can read over, that female authors are reluctant to receive, revise, and resubmit. They are treated more critically at research seminars. They are more overrepresented in those type of work in academia, the so-called academic household, which is less recognized, less rewarded. There is a lot of evidence on that, but this evidence is not well known. And so it's important to show and to build a consensus on new policies on this evidence. There is also evidence that if we control for excellence productivity, women take more time to go on in the career, and especially for the glass door, but also the glass ceiling. There is evidence that moving from associate professor to full professors remains lower for women even after controlling for productivity. So this is very important to build consensus along positive actions, to first of all show evidence and discuss what is this evidence and the causes of this evidence. It's also very important to build in consensus on the consequences of gender gaps. And again, I'm focusing on that because the process to approve positive actions, we will see they are effective or not, in which conditions. Anyway, the process is very important, and building consensus and opening a debate and deconstructing dominant views based especially on this, let's say, rhetoric of excellence is very important, not just on causes, but also on consequences of gender gaps. And again, there are two types of consequences of gender gap discrimination in academia. Do you still see me and the slide? Everything is fine?
Yes.
Okay, no, sorry, I don't see you, so I don't see your faces if you're following me or not. Okay. So consequences of gender gap discrimination in academia, these has for sure consequences on those that are discriminated, in this case, women. So it's an issue of the effect on women, on the discriminated group. So we can say it's an issue of fairness. And there is evidence that, for example, on Italy, that women on average wait 5 years more than men in moving to the upper position, the full professorship. And this 5 years longer time means a lose of 2,050 euros during their career. So for women, it means also economic consequence, but that's not to do just for women, but it has to do with innovation science, and so with also the so-called excellence and productivity, because again, there is a lot of evidence showing that investment in women boosts economic development, competitiveness, job creation. This is not just in academia, in general. And there is evidence that diversity diversity, race diversity, gender diversity, and so on, boost innovation. So again, the rationale for reducing gender gaps lies on fair kind of argument, but it lies also on science innovation kind of arguments. And this is very important again, especially in a context where the paradigm, let's say, of excellence, of meritocracy is strong, showing that there are consequences of gender gaps that are not just to do with women, but with the way the innovation, the science goes on, the way science is produced, innovation is produced, is very important. So it's very important to create spaces of reflection, top down, bottom down, at different levels in the governing bodies, in the department, among students, among colleagues. So create different situation spaces of reflections where to discuss the mix of factors that generate gender gaps and okay, so building consensus on the causes, building consensus, opening the debate on the causes, opening the debate on the consequences. Given this, how do we tackle these gender gaps that seem not so much rooted on merit and productivity? So for multiple barriers to multiple actions, as I was saying before, structural actions are important, but they need to go together with cultural actions. And this is, again, the fourth step, building consensus on the causes, building consensus on the consequences, and building consensus on the remedies. Building consensus, which there is not just one way, obviously, but opening debate on that, on the remedies. Again, this is probably an issue that is more well known when we discussed it, when we look at the debate on gender quotas, which is okay, fixing the numbers. Gender quotas fix the numbers of selection committees, of presence of women in decision-making bodies, in selection committees. So is this way of fixing the numbers? Financial incentives, we will see in a moment, we fix the numbers more in terms of the outcomes, or gives incentives to not just to change the composition of the governing bodies, but to change the outcomes. There are other kind of structural actions that are important, that have to do with the phases of women's career that are actually weak phases where women can actually become less productive, less meritocratic. That has to do with the motherhood penalty, which is not the only reason of gender gaps, but is there. So structural actions that are tackling the issue of motherhood penalty, we all know that there is motherhood penalty, but there is not fatherhood penalty. So like structural action like extra funds when a woman returns from maternity leave, or teaching reduction at return from maternity leave to give more time to research. These are structural actions that fix the numbers, or try to change the barriers to be present in the decision-making bodies, or to go on with their life course and career. Yes, again, fixing numbers might not be enough, because if we just change, and there is evidence indeed that having more women in decision-making bodies, so that's gender quotas, not necessarily means that more women are promoted. So having more women on board not necessarily means that more women are taken. And again, this is because women are less productive. So at the end, if the criteria used and women embrace this criteria, at the end, men are preferred, has to do with the fact that having more women on board might not assure that the way selection are done, the way excellence is defined, the recruitment and promotion practices are refought or under discussion. So it's not that the matter of having more women on board, but it's the matter of deconstructing or reflecting on the way decisions are taken, criteria are fixed, and practices are done. Which means not only fixing numbers, but this is, well, let's say a slogan that now is well known in gender equality plan literature, which is fixing knowledge and fixing institution. But these are not just slogan, it's very important because it means, again, having more women on board is important, but it's not enough if there is no also a genderization of the knowledge, which means genderizing science, which means genderizing approaches, changing not just the number of people that conduct and disseminate research, but also disseminating new topics, new approaches, new models, not only new topics and new approaches, but also new models of being a scientist. For example, refusing the unconditional worker model, publish or perish, where there is no time and no right for other spheres of life, and also in a way criticizing the idea of science as competitive, but promoting a cooperation style of science. So it's not just fixing number, but it's also fixing knowledge and institution. Sorry, the cat, I hope. So fixing number, not enough or successful, we said, but important. Let's start from gender quotas, and then let's move finally, as I announced at the beginning, let's move to the second type of positive action, which is the financial incentives. Gender quotas, there is evidence. I put some references in brackets before, so then if you are interested to look at them. But so there is evidence that gender quotas in decision-making bodies or in evaluation committees not necessarily means having then more women that are hired or promoted, not necessary. But this depends a lot. We can say that which kind of women go on board, and how much the process of having quotas, having more women, goes together with discussing and rethinking the definition of excellence and the power of networks. It's true that that's also a statistical rule. We can say that if just few women are on board, there might be a self-selection of those women that go on board, which probably are women that have more absorbed or they produce or reproduce the dominant mechanism to be able to enter, let's say, the room. It's true if gender quotas become larger, so it's like 40%, 50%, then there is also more space for diversity. And so this possible neutral impact or no impact of having more women on board means having more women hired or promoted might be reduced if actually the gender quota become not 10%, 20%, but more, because in this case, plurality, let's say diversity, or those that enter the evaluation committees, the decision-making bodies, become larger. But anyway, even though, and there is some evidence that in some cases when gender quotas have been applied, this didn't have an impact on more women hired or promoted, yet there are anyway other, do you say, no, spillover effect, I don't know if the word in English, but there are other impacts. So even though gender quotas are not successful in having more women hired at the end, yet have an impact in terms of role model and in terms of fostering equality culture and practices. And this is, for example, a list of 4 reasons that you find in the policy brief. The policy brief is structured as a policy brief, so in a more, let's say, straightforward way, where we have tried to summarize the arguments against gender quotas or financial incentives and the arguments in favor. the arguments against have to do, as I said before, are mainly rooted in the idea that this is an attack to meritocracy and that we low down the level, and then also that if we apply quotas, gender quota, then we might have to apply to other minority groups, again lowering down the level of excellence, let's say, of acceptable excellence. But these are the main arguments against. Arguments in favor are, for example, these four that you read here. There is an issue of role model, that even though more women on board, doesn't mean necessarily that more women are taken, are hired or promoted. But yet, having more women on board, having more Black people on board, having more diverse decision-making bodies makes change normality models, change the idea that leadership, decision-making are not just male, are not just white. So elevate the visibility of women that at cascade might also be as a driver for young women choices, that they have a role model. And that they might also push more women to apply because they feel that the environment is more diverse. The greater female presence on decision-making bodies or evaluation committees can mitigate isolation and tokenism. And as I said, and that can also be seen since when a policy is introduced, there are discourses around the policy. So discourses around gender equality might reinforce the idea that gender inequality is a problem and that gender equality has to be pursued, so promote equality culture and practices. So even though gender quota might not be effective in hiring and promoting more women, unless we rethink the way promotion is pursued, nevertheless, there are these, let's say, positive impact in terms of role model and fostering equality culture and practices. What about the advantage of financial incentives that now I'll explain you more precisely how they have been built in these 3 case studies of Germany, Torino, and Trento. Well, financial incentives on the outcomes. So those departments or those universities that at the end of a process, of a competition process, that they hire or promote a woman, get a financial incentive. There is evidence that in this case, more women are hired and promoted. So these financial incentives push university to pay more attention to, let's say, gender diversity in assumption and promotion. So compared to gender quotas, financial incentives have an impact on outcomes, and they still have the same impact of gender quotas on role model and fostering equality culture and practices. So with all this debate, I've tried to summarize on pros and cons of introducing positive actions and the link or the problematic link with the ideology or rhetoric of a meritocracy, and so the importance of, as I said, of building a debate on the why of the inequality and the consequences of inequality. After this, let's just describe very briefly 3 case studies where financial incentive. There are a lot of gender quotas are nearly everywhere. So in the policy brief, we have chosen to focus especially on those fewer cases where financial incentives have been introduced, to see how it happened and what was the process that built to the consensus around this more, let's say, challenging and innovative policy, and whether it was effective or not. So let's start with the German case, because it's the oldest. And this is described in a paper that you see here. So if you want to go to see, it's described in different papers, but this is one of the most recent and I think the clearest one, because it's also tested the impact of this. And it tests the impact of this program that is called the Women Professor Program, which German policymaker implemented in 2007, and then they repeated. And this program had two steps. One step is that in order to get financing, a university need to be appointed, need to be chosen as an eligible university, which means that the university need to show that they have a certain degree of gender equality, a certain degree of commitment towards gender inequality. And so universities that want to participate, that is, they want to get this financial support for women full professors, they have to submit gender equality concept, gender equality, and to show that they are good in reaching or in fighting gender inequalities. First step. Second step, once they receive, let's say, they are eligible, then they receive funding when they appoint a female professor. And the findings are the one that you see here, covered the different quantity of money. What about the success of this policy as it is described in this paper by Fernandez, Hilbert, Storm, and Walter in 2023? Absolute numbers. Well, there was a lot of advertisement on this program, and a lot of universities applied, and actually they applied but before applying they had to, let's say, well, could be also they had to show that they were doing something. And actually around 152 universities applied, nearly 124 were accepted. So this process, this two steps process, you get financing not just if you hire a full professor, but before you have to show that this hiring is part of a more commitment and of a gender equality plan, let's say. So this was a process that boosts debate and design of intersected and multiple actions towards gender inequality. And also in the second round, there was a success. What about once the university apply and they are accepted, then they get the financing if women are appointed. And indeed, the data show that, yes, in absolute number, but not just in absolute number, but also point one, in this paper, there are econometric analysis show to what extent those universities having the financing had more women appointed compared to university not having the financing. They are using a difference in difference method, so the treatment, not treatment kind of experiment method. And indeed, they found that the probability that a newly appointed professor is female increased of about 10% in those universities joining the program compared to those universities not joining. You might say, well, that's not, I mean, that's like tautologic. No, it's not, but in any case, even though it is, it's very important to measure the impact of a measure like that. The second kind of analysis that you find in this paper has to do with not just whether fixing the number, so whether the numbers of women appointed as full professor has increased or not, and there is evidence that it has increased, but also what happens in the mechanisms supporting women in their access to the full professorship. So to get more women into fixing the numbers, what happened in those universities? And so the authors of this paper, first of all, try to see whether this has meant actually lowering of the level of the publication record, and lowering general or just specifically. And what they find is that the introduction of the program has indeed affected the publication requirements for women that have been lowered, but this has not meant that in general the publication requirement, or let's say the excellence, how is defined, requirements of the university competitions all around has been lowered. So no. And that the reason why the publication requirement have been lowered, so it was a way to slow down the barriers to assess, but because actually there's been a discussion on what it matters to win a full professorship. Publication is surely good, central, but it's not the only thing that should be evaluated. So this process for getting financing has also boosted a rethinking of the criteria that we should put into, and what we should evaluate, what they should evaluate. So not only publication record, but for example, putting more emphasis on teaching duties or committing work on academic hours or on other pieces of the research work, not just publications. Policy implications of this German experience. Again, I'm just summarizing this piece of work, and in 2 minutes I'm closing. Yeah, the policy implication is twofold. Okay, there has been an impact on fixing the number, no doubt about that. 10% more of women became full professor with the cascade we said before. So more women are full professor, more women are decision-making bodies. It works also as a role model and blah, 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 blah. So, okay, impact, but especially what it seems that have worked is the fact that the university had to show that they were committing, and that to prove that they are committing to gender equality, not just with that specific measure. And so using financial instruments to encourage institutions to implement affirmative action by creating gender equality policies to change institutions from within. So as a piece of a broader policy package, increasing also acceptance. Okay, what about the other two cases that you find in the policy brief? These are two cases that come from Italy, and that they are one in my university, but the first one is the University of Trento, because in Italy, a bit drawing from what was going on Germany. It's also close to Germany, Trento, so it's also a reference point. Trento tried to design something similar, and it was the first university in Italy pioneering this approach in 2014. And they design a policy on the outcome, in the sense that for those in the University of Trento, those department hiring as a full professor one of the underrepresented gender. In Trento, the approach was with the underrepresented gender. So if there is a department, a scientific area where the underrepresented gender was men, and the glass ceiling was opposite, let's say, in this case, if that department was hiring a man, he got the incentive. So there was a monitoring of the gender scissors in each department, and the measure was designed accordingly to that level. The underrepresented gender, that if one of the underrepresented gender was winning a full professorship, there was an incentive, an economic incentives in the form of punto organico, which is an Italian system I don't explain, but that's okay. What about Torino? That is my my university. We had a debate, let's say a 1-year debate on how to introduce that. But it was at the end, we have to admit that it was easier than we expected to get consensus on that, because we expected much more resistance. There was resistance, but we worked a lot on this, as I said before, on trying to not just okay, we had the director and the governance support. This is crucial to make policy like that, especially policies controversial like that. You absolutely need the governance support, and we had the governance support. But this governance support went together with creating as much as possible spaces of reflections on that. So we created, for example, the MINDtheGEP Delegate Network, where for each department of the university, we nominated, we asked to nominate one person that is like, say, the bridge to gender equality policy, to the MINDtheGEP project. And so we have this board, this network, and we met the network several times over the year to discuss different aspects of the gender equality plan, including this one. And having a debate there was very useful, because then this debate went into the department, went into the Senato Accademico, and slowly, these resistance were lowering down. And at the end, we designed a policy that was even more, let's say, how do you say, there more than what us as MINDtheGEP team were hoping, because at the end, this policies is just for women, it's not for the underrepresented gender, because it has explicitly the aim to reduce the gender gap. And it is for each department. It's a temporary policy of 2 years. For we how do you say, we prove, we test, let's say, we apply, and then we see what's happened in 2 years. For 2 years, the idea is that every department that promote a full professor woman, regardless the gender gap within the department, get the incentives. This was something that really the rector wanted. At the end, we embraced, the rector and the governor, because saying, okay, gender gap in the University of Torino is still too high, especially at the top, the gender scissor. So everybody that contributes to reduce the gender gap at the University of Torino, we give a premium. Then in 2-3 years, that if we have adjusted the numbers at the top, then we might think to a policy that is more design ad hoc just in those departments where the gap is higher. But for the moment, let's do for everybody that contribute to the reduction of the gender gap in Torino. And we approved it in just in 2023. We don't have data because it's just new. Sorry, I didn't say that, I didn't show here. In Trento, Barbara Poggio, that was the one that was the delegate to equal opportunity, and she was following this policy, said that yeah, it had an impact on fixing the numbers. There is evidence that the number in Torino, obviously, it's just started, but in 2 years we will have numbers and data also to show how it worked in terms of fixing the numbers, and also how it moved this debate on attack on meritocracy or not. I think I can stop here. And thanks a lot.